The video game industry may be littered with cliché stories about gun-toting heroes saving the world from flesh-eating zombies and alien invasions, but there are some truly deep, meaningful tales told in this medium too, and it's often easy to not fully get them at first. I mean, there's no shame in it, I'm as bad for it as anyone, but with this in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 7 ambiguous video game endings you're totally getting wrong. Number 7, Alan Wake. At the very end of Alan Wake, we see Alan sacrifice himself in order to save his wife Alice, who's been trapped by the villainous Dark Presence. He dives into Cauldron Lake, where said ancient evil presence has been lurking, and Alice emerges safely while Alan starts typing in an underwater cabin, saying that the lake is actually an ocean. Those are the game's cryptic final lines, and a lot of people kind of come out with this title scratching their heads. I did for about 10 years. So, what does all of this mean? Well, the answer to this ending can actually be found in the game's DLC, but many never played this extra content, and as such were left perplexed by the game's ending. In the downloadable episodes, we learn that Alan did actually defeat the Dark Presence, but his own mind had been fragmented in the process, leaving him trapped in a creation of his own imagination. The 2 DLC episodes show Alan fighting back against a dark version of himself, a nutter called Mr. Scratch, in order to try and return to reality. At the end of the second and final episode, Alan starts writing a new book, this time called Return, signifying his return back to the real world, where he will finally be reunited with Alice and his friends. So yeah, it's a little happier than we initially thought. Number 6, Inside. Inside's ending shows the boy, who the player has been controlling throughout the game, integrated into a giant blob-like creature, which then breaks out of a shadowy facility, killing some of its captors along the way, and finally escaping to freedom away from the dystopian city the rest of the game takes place in. While many assume that this is true freedom for the creature finally getting a taste of the outside world, the final shot on the beach can actually be glimpsed in the lab as you smash through it, implying that this freedom is actually just another cage, a scenario that the scientists had already planned for. It's just another testing ground. More so than this though, this is actually only the first ending, as there's a secret finale that adds even more context to this story. In this hidden scene, we see the boy unplug some kind of mind control device, and as he does so, he becomes uncontrollable by the player, symbolizing his escape from your control. This, by the way, is something that will pop up in a later entry as well. So many video game writers are obsessed with the idea of control, and I love it. Anyway, the theme of this entire game is control. We think we're playing as a boy with free will in a world where everyone else is brainwashed, but in reality, the blob was in control of the kid all along, and by extension, the blob was also controlling us. The game provides no real motive for the player, who simply runs along to see what happens, doing exactly what the blob and the game developers want. Number 5, The Last of Us. I know, I simply cannot believe either that I am once again dipping my head into the waters of Last of Us discourse, but hey, sometimes you just need to stare into the abyss. While the original game avoided most of the controversy aimed at its successor, it still had a few points of contention, especially in regards to Joel's final actions. Now, for the 5 of you who don't know, The Last of Us follows the exploits of grizzled survivor Joel and the teenage Ellie in a world where the majority of the population have been transformed into zombie-like creatures. Ellie, though, is immune to this virus, and so Joel ushers her across the country to deliver her to the Fireflies, a faction who claim to be able to make a cure. In the end, Joel is told that in order for the vaccine to be made, the surgery will kill Ellie. So he takes matters into his own hands, killing all of the Fireflies and whisking Ellie away while she was knocked out. The sticking point of this for some fans, though, is the idea of the vaccine itself, namely that the Fireflies wouldn't have been able to create one, and that Ellie's sacrifice would have been in vain anyway, so Joel did the right thing. The argument goes that the surgery was reckless, so hey, Joel didn't doom the world by saving his new daughter. And while these things can admittedly never be 100% 100%, it is implied that the Fireflies had a 99.9% chance of crafting a cure thanks to Ellie. Not only does this thematically make the ending hit harder, as it makes Joel a far more interesting, compelling, and flawed character, but it also emphasizes the sheer scale of what he's willing to give up for Ellie. The choice just has more weight when he doesn't doubt for a second that a cure would be possible. The fact that the writers are said to have explained that the Fireflies would have definitely made a cure too pretty much puts this one to bed. Number 4, Returnal. Returnal, admittedly, is a difficult game to pass. On the surface, it's about Celine, an astronaut who has crash-landed on an alien planet and finds herself stuck in a time loop, each death at the hands of the planet's beasties, bringing her back to the moment of the crash. Throughout the game, you have to traverse this alien planet, plunge into its depths, and attempt to free yourself from this curse. It's not that simple a story, however, as there are hints along the way that everything might just be in Celine's head, maybe. She's haunted by a faceless astronaut while on the planet, has flashbacks or dreams about previous moments in her life, and finds her own car at the bottom of the planet's oceanic depths. All of this weirdness essentially hides the fact that Returnal is telling a much more personal and less literal story than first appears. Really, everything on this planet is a metaphor for the character's grief. After suffering through a car accident that took the life of her son and maybe even herself, Celine is stuck reliving this moment over and over, unable to come to terms with her loss. Everything she sees on the alien planet reflects her cycle of blame, no matter how much time passes, a manifested hell of her own psyche. Everything in her real life has a parallel on this alien world. Hell, even Celine's mother, who she had a complicated relationship with, also shows up in the finale of the game in the form of a monstrous but kinda tragic creature. I am admittedly just scratching the surface here, so if you want to dive deeper, I would heartily recommend Jacob Geller's video essay on this game, which helped inform this entry. Seriously, this shooter has depths that I just didn't pick up on at all the first time through. Number 3, Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus ends when our hero Wanda is suddenly weak and weary, with cloudy eyes and horns sprouting from his head. He turns into a shadowy beast and fights off some hunters who manage to seal him away with a magical spell before escaping. Mono, the girl who has been asleep for the entire game that he was trying to save, then wakes up and picks up a horned baby. Now, while almost everyone will be in the comments saying that this story is obvious, for a lot of casual players, there is a lot to miss here. First up, the things that we all know. Essentially, in destroying the Colossi throughout the game, you are actually liberating an ancient evil who appeared to be a helpful guiding presence earlier on in this adventure. He manifests as the shadowy creature at the end and is sealed away once again. The horned baby, of course, is Wanda. Some part of him survived as a baby, but you have to have played Eco to truly understand everything about this ending. That's because in that title, children are also born with horns, so it turns out that they were actually the descendants of Wanda from this game. Mono, meanwhile, lives forever and grows bitter over time, going on to become the villainous queen of Ico. Number 2, Dark Souls. Dark Souls' story is purposefully ambiguous. There is a huge mythology there that you can dive into, but the most basic summation of it is this. You're an undead champion on a journey through a dying world known as the Age of Fire. After besting your enemies, you have the option to kindle the first flame, prolonging this age and allowing the world to continue in its current form, or extinguish it, pushing the world into the Age of Dark. Now, on the surface, this choice seems pretty cut and dry, right? I mean, fire is good, the world ending and being plunged into darkness is bad. Surely it's better to continue civilization as you know it rather than team up with these serpentine little freaks. I mean, nobody with this face can be up to any good. The thing is, the series increasingly made it clear that continuing to light the flame and continue the Age of Fire was probably a bad idea. By the time you get to the third game, with the age extended to the point of breaking point, reality itself is collapsing and you have no sense of space and time. You are in a hellscape that nobody would want to live in. The point of these games then is that change isn't a bad thing. The unknown might look scary, but you need to know when to call it quits and realize that something isn't working rather than simply continuing with the familiar. There are bigger reasons why the Age of Fire blows as well, of course, and for a better dive into that than I can give here, I would definitely recommend checking out James Stephanie Sterling's Dark Souls vid that they did on their Jimquisition channel. Number 1, Metal Gear Solid 2. There's so much confusion surrounding the ending of Metal Gear Solid 2. Initially about Rookie Raiden stopping a terrorist plot, the game ends with the revelations that you've been controlled by an AI this whole time, and that pretty much everything you were told was a lie. Your wife isn't who she said she is, the character you're playing as is way darker than you thought, and reality as you know it begins to crumble away. While most players, including me, initially took the ending at face value, it's actually a much more allegorical and metaphorical ending about the player rather than the characters. As chronicled in a few great pieces, primarily Super Bunny Hop's excellent critical close-up video, MGS2 is all about simulations. The game itself is structured almost identically to the first Metal Gear Solid, with the idea that Raiden himself had already played through that game's events in VR as part of his training. So you're essentially playing a game about someone else who has played a game about a game that you've played before. Still with me? The whole idea of this is to get the player thinking about what this all means, about the artificiality of what they're experiencing and what they should be getting out of it. The characters question their own reality at the end and can't grasp it because it isn't real. It's all controlled by the player, who are themselves being controlled by the developers. In the end, in that super weird scene in Manhattan, the characters decide to reject the player's control and go to live their own life with their own agency. In that sense, MGS2's ending shouldn't be taken totally literally. You can do that, and obviously MGS4 follows up on that, but first and foremost, it should be considered in these meta terms as commentary on peeling back the layers of how games themselves are made. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Have I been talking out my backside, or do you also totally click with these interpretations? Seriously, I would really like to know, and while you're down there in the comments, if you could, please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture Gaming for more lists like this on the regular. Even if you don't thought I've been Josh, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for putting up with me, and I'll see you soon.